What is up, everyone? We are back again. Preview number 4 of 5 for the major conferences for college hoops. We are less than a week away now, feeling really close. We've got a couple of these previews in the can already on the Run Pure Sports YouTube page. If you missed those, we did the ACC, Big East, and Big Ten over the last couple weeks. Go ahead and find those on the YouTube channel, or they're pinned on my Twitter at Steve Boynton VT on Twitter. Run Pure Sports, if you want to join us, we do every sport. We've got the NFL going on, college football, obviously. We had a big UFC weekend, NBA going on every night, hockey, and college hoops, of course, starting soon. Every main slate of the year, we're going to have a playbook, core plays, and projections up. And we've got a great group there in the Discord. It's a ton of fun. So go ahead and join us, runpuresports.com. RPS 15 will get you 15% off your monthly subscription. Gavin, now that that's out of the way, we are down to the last two conferences, but these are the big boy conferences, deep conferences, and they definitely have the ceiling teams up top. How you doing tonight, man?
Good. Yeah, it's always good to talk to Big 12. It's been the best conference in college basketball each of the last 3 years. Also was slightly down last year when you look at their kind of overall rating on KenPom compared to the years prior, which might have led to kind of some odd or not foreseen runs from teams that, we'll dive into. But yeah, you got 3 of the top 7 on KenPom, 4 of the top 8, 7 of the top 17 teams. So it's as top loaded as it's going to get. You got multiple national title contenders, but you adopted, the 3 ugly stepchildren of the Pac-12 with ASU, Colorado, and Utah, which is going to drag down the overall conference rating. But otherwise, ready to get going.
Yeah, let's start with one of those national title contenders in Arizona. Interesting offseason for them, losing 4 key pieces from last year's team. Gavin, last year, 27-9. They end up number 6 overall at KenPom, 15-5 in conference. But like I said, 4 guys from their rotation gone, including star center Umar Ballo. But they also bring in some interesting transfers headlined by Trey Townsend from Oakland, who was great for them, led them in the tournament. What do you think of the offseason overall for Arizona? A lot of turnover here for a top team.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of turnover. There was also a lot of turnover when they lost three guys to the NBA draft in like the first 42 picks a couple years ago with Mathurin, Koloko, and who else was it? I can't remember. But now you lose the core of Ballo, Pell Larson, Keshad Johnson, and also Boswell. It's not great. It's the best big in the conference, the best two-way power forward in the conference, and it's a great, maybe best connector wing of the conference. But that being said, Tommy Lloyd's 3 KenPom finishes in his first 3 years are 5th, 11th, and 6th. So, you're just going to kind of have to take his word for it that he knows what he's doing. It really vaults Jalen Bradley and KJ Lewis into much more minute-dominant guard roles alongside Caleb Love than they were afforded last year without Boswell, without Larson. And yeah, Trey Townsend is obviously a great pickup, elite rebounder, elite scorer around the rim. His perimeter shooting, which she showed really well in his scrimmage, and obviously 1 game sample against, some blind school, but that could be like the swing piece of this team. Like if he's really able to stretch the floor, even like a, 2 threes a game, maybe hit, 33% type thing. Don't even need to be a good shooter, just a threat. Toby Awaka is like an undersized 4'5", but is like one of the best 6'7" rebounders in the country, is a great defender. And you have the pairing of Krivas and Visar that'll split the 5. Visar is a little more of the stretch. Krivas is going to bang down low. So there's still, plenty of that coming back when you combine with Pac-12 Player of the Year, Caleb Love, who had his best O rating of his career. His previous high at North Carolina was 101.5. First year under Tommy Lloyd, 112.8. And he shot them out of multiple games and still had, a pretty good efficiency rating. So still plenty to work with. I think pretty safely outside kind of the first tier of teams, which is a very unique and elite tier of 3 teams, but safely in that second tier. So kind of good with they're at projected wise 10th.
Yeah, I was going to say, the losses are big, but I kind of like the guys who are coming into new roles. You mentioned Bradley and KJ Lewis, guys that we were high on last year. KJ Lewis, I thought, had a really impressive freshman year, playing about 40% of minutes. Bradley and Lewis are going to step into the starting lineup here. The starting five is strong, man. Love, Bradley, Lewis, Townsend, and Krivas, who you mentioned. He was super efficient in, a secondary role behind Ballo last year. He is going to step in the starting lineup here. Not expecting crazy high minutes, but, if he gets mid-20s here, his rates are so good that I think he's going to have an awesome season, and he's going to be great for us in DFS. Great offensive rebounder, 14.6%, top 30 nationally if he had qualified. Awaka there, I think, is good insurance in the front court if you don't get much from Visar. I just think this team fits well together. My one big concern, Gav, is who's going to make threes outside of Caleb Love. You mentioned Townsend having to shoot it more and better from deep. We could probably see a step from Bradley or Lewis. That wouldn't shock me. They weren't perimeter scorers last year, but, we've seen these high-level athletes progress, obviously, as they get deeper into their career. That's my major concern is the shooting, but we know the tempo is going to be there. We know it's going to be a top 20-ish offense overall.
Yeah, the only other two things, that the guys that we left out are the ones that alleviate that concern. Highly heralded Carter Bryant, I think 4-star, 5-star Frost, depending on where you look. He's like the ideal swing 2-3 for the NBA, like 6'7", good verticality on his shot. He's going to shoot over small guards. He's going to be mismatches for a lot of 3s and 4s. He's going to help that. Anthony Del Orso is going to play the Cedric Henderson role coming over from Campbell to Arizona, and just kind of being that, 3-point shooter, but obviously aren't the optimal guys I think that you'd want to play. Bryant definitely could come into his own. I really like what I see from him. But Del Orso is going to be kind of a piece. So how much does that help? Yeah, it's probably the big swing pieces are the Bradley development of the shot and the Townsend development of the shot. We know this team's going to defend. It was the first top 10 defense that Tommy Lloyd's had last year. Losing Keshad Johnson doesn't help that, but man, they're going to put immense pressure on the ball just with KJ and Jaden Bradley.
Yeah, and I just thought of that third NBA guy, the Mathurin, Koloko,
Jalen Terry.
Dalen Terry.
I said Jalen Terry. Dalen Terry. Yes.
Yeah, Dalen Terry was the third. Quick peek at their non-con here, Gav. They get going right away. They play Wisconsin on the road, second Friday of the season. That's interesting. I know that we're both low on Wisconsin overall. And then the following Friday, home against Duke. So that is a matchup to circle on the 22nd of November. And it looks like their last big game in non-con is that big December 14th day where there's just a ton of great non-conference games. I think that is the game against UCLA. I believe that's in New York City, but don't quote me on that. No, they're in Phoenix, so it's a semi-home for Arizona. So some decent non-con games there. Any last thoughts on Arizona here?
Not a ton. I'm not looking to bet against Wisconsin at home as an underdog, no matter how bad they are. And Duke is going to be really good, returning, the revenge favor that Arizona dealt them in Cameron Indoor, with Duke having a clearly superior team this go around. So just kind of other points on those spots.
All right, let's move on to Arizona State here. Last season, 14-18, 127th at KenPom is where they ended the season, Gav, 8-12 in conference. Bunch of turnover in the roster, probably necessary turnover, I would say. Frankie Collins was the star last year. It hurts to lose him. But I'm not really sure that the other pieces leaving aren't, additions by subtraction. You note that they brought in 3 just very high usage mid-major scorers, headlined by BJ Freeman, and they add a top 10 recruit as well. So I actually really like the offseason moves from here. I think it at least raises their ceiling. But the question is, how do you get 3 guys who are coming up in competition, who are used to shooting the ball 20 times a game, to work together? This coach hasn't really proven that he can make stuff like that work. That was kind of the case last year, except with, I think, less talented players overall. What do you think about Arizona State?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Bobby Hurley, right? He's had one KenPom top 50 finish in his career. It was in 2018 they lost the playing game of the NCAA tournament. So that his best finish would put them in the back quarter of the Big 12. So that just kind of pegs where, Arizona is likely to fall. I do agree that they raised the ceiling with the offseason acquisitions. Jaden Quaintance was quite literally a free agent. I think he left after he was a Kentucky commit, left after Cal left. And then Bobby Hurley just opened up a bottomless sack of money for him. But he is like a mega high upside, really interesting with good feel, face-up ability, can even play make a little bit. He's definitely going to be the one that we need to keep our eye on. BJ Freeman at Milwaukee was playing on just kind of a YOLO offense with no care for defense. And he put up numbers. Like he's kind of the guy like a Marion Jackson, who I trust, still to translate at the high major level. Have more concerns about Alston Mason, 1.5 years as a starter in the Missouri Valley. There's still a lot to be proven, but we didn't even bring up how bad was this team in their scrimmage against Duke. It was like, how bad you have to be in a scrimmage to lose like 103-49 when Duke is playing like Neil Bogosevich or whatever, like a guy who's going to be working for Bogosevich and Associates CPA firm. Like it's insane. They actually got just blasted so bad. So I think it's the widest range of outcomes team in the conference. If I can buy into them having not NBA scoring ability, but to run a Bobby Hurley offense, it's very dribble jumper oriented. It's not really schematically sexy. It's not going to draw many open shots and scheme well. It's going to rely on guys making plays. Maybe they have guys to do that. Maybe. This could also go terribly wrong. Like Quaintance could pull a Jalen Johnson and just be out mid-season if this team sucks and he doesn't want to ruin his draft stock, something like that. So yeah, it's quite wide. KenPom variation wise in terms of where they could finish, but I think range of outcomes for Big 12 standings is quite narrow in terms of anywhere from last to like fourth to last.
Yeah, shout out Jalen Johnson just signed a $150 million deal in the NBA.
Yep. Who needs Mike Krzyzewski?
Yeah, no, I kind of with you. I just think that the top four on this team, the ceiling is high. They've at least done it. Last year's team seemed like a hodgepodge of guys who were kind of forced into usage because they wanted the usage, not because they deserved it. And like BJ Freeman, he was on a bad team, but he's done it. Jihad, Mason. I see how this goes wrong. He's lost locker rooms before, and these guys are going to want their usage along with Quaintance. So we'll see how it works out. I think the good thing is hopefully it takes shots away from Adam Miller, who has just been terrible pretty much his entire career. Under 100 O rating again last season. Shot 30% from three.
He was their worst 3-point shooter. So you look at they've had 3 straight years being 275th or worse in 3-point percentage. That's terrible for a power conference team. BJ Freeman, Alston Mason were both 35% on mega volume. Jihad was 35% at 6'9". What he did at Ball State was pretty interesting. Like he's got some tools, and then Miller's like the 4th best shooter. The ceiling is there. I'll give you that. But at 70th right now, that's definitely way closer to the ceiling than it is towards their floor.
Yep. Agreed. Any last thoughts here? I think they end up starting Quaintance at the 5. I think that makes sense.
He starts. It doesn't matter where he starts, at what position. He's the one guy I can trust to start.
Yeah, that's true. All right, let's keep it moving. Let's go to a much more interesting team. Let's go to Baylor. Last season, Baylor 24-11. They end up 15th at KenPom. Tough schedule. 11-7 in conference. A bit of turnover here. They lose their annual 5-star wing in Jacoby Walter, and they lose their point guard, Ray J. Dennis, but kind of seems like a plug and play in the portal, picking up Roach from Duke. Super, super safe, high floor point guard. And they pick up O'Meara, of course, from Miami. I think raises the ceiling of their starting lineup. And then Edgecombe, man, everyone is just raving about him. Seems like he is going to be an even better piece than Jacoby Walter was last year. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll take over while the FBI surrounds your apartment complex and rushes your premises. But
What the hell's going on?
It's Chicago. What do you expect? Baylor tied for third in the best conference in the country, which is good. They're also 4 games back of Houston. They've finished 15th and 16th on KenPom in the last 2 years after the championship. They've had a top 8 offense each of the last 4 years since like the post-COVID year. That's not been in question. It's the defense that fell from 22nd and 13th during the year before the championship and then the championship to 107th and 72nd the last 2 years. So that's the big issue, right? Scott Drew's a no middle proponent. But the problem with Baylor, especially the last 2 years, is they haven't been able to keep guys in front of them. And if you can drive through a no middle defense, then you get uncontested paths to the basket. And they haven't in the past had rim protectors to really guard the rim, especially post JTT injury, right? This was a top 5 3-point percentage team last year that shot 6 of 24 in their tourney loss to Clemson. That's just going to happen, but they don't make it because the defense doesn't hold up. So, we'll get to kind of how they address that. But you mentioned Roach, right? Like multi-year starter, has kind of seen it all, been through it all. I think him leaving Duke more says more about Roach himself. Like, if Duke really wanted him back, he's coming back, right? Like, there's no way he doesn't go back to Duke.
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting departure, but I also think that Duke just wanted to hand the keys over to the younger guards, honestly.
Yeah, like he was 3rd on the team in usage during ACC play. Like, is he really the point guard that's like a literally title winning point guard like we've seen from someone like a Tristan Newton, in the past couple of years? I mean, I think that's in question. Edgecombe, yeah, I mean, dude, he's sick. Like, and the thing is, he doesn't have many defensive questions like a lot of these high volume scorers like a Trey Johnson will have. And then when you have guys, in the Olympics like Eric Gordon, who nobody's going to mistake for some fireball microwave NBA scorer, but Eric Gordon, Ayton, these guys deferring to an 18-year-old. I mean, I think it does speak to kind of the ceiling of this guy. Like, pretty freebie to be a top 5 frosh in the country, I think. One of the higher scorers. And then, yeah, you had Omier. Like, Omir's an interesting situation, right? Because last year, Miami was so bad last year, kind of like Murphy's Law injury type year, where he got to at least test from the 3-point line, took over 2 attempts a game, and shot 39% in ACC play. And you're going to face multiple no-middle defenses in the Big 12. Like, I think that's a really interesting unlock offensive piece, but I also have major questions about Omier on the defensive side. He's definitely undersized. I think he's more like the 6'8" kind of size. He's also an extremely vertical athlete with long arms, which kind of makes up for it on the rebounding, but he's a 7th percentile rim defense defender on a point per possession basis, 25th percentile on post-ups. Like, I still have my questions on that front. So can Baylor stay in front of guys a little bit better? Yes, I think. Do they have a rim protector? That I still have questions about. But the other thing you mentioned is, like, this top 5 might be as good as anybody in the country, right? The depth is thin, and we've had like major injuries with guys here. I mean, Omier played almost every game last year, but battled through injuries constantly. Langston Love obviously missed half the year. Roach has missed multiple stretches of multiple seasons of his career with toe injuries. Like, if this team runs into injuries, then yeah, it's definitely going to fall outside of kind of the tier 1 or maybe even tier 2, but also has, I think, the upside if they stay healthy, just play their 5 or 6 guys. This is like, I think Final Four kind of upside team.
Yeah, their starting 5 is sick. I mean, Roach, Love, Nunn, Edgecombe, Omier, possibly. It is a small team overall. It's a small team without much depth, but the top of the roster is really, really good. Roach really shot it well last year. Shot 43% from 3. This team, I'm not really worried at all about the scoring or the shooting. It's all on the defense, right? Like, if they actually end up 23rd in defensive efficiency, which is where Ken Pom has them to start the year, yeah, they're a top 12 team. They definitely were not that last year. And, I don't really see a defensive stopper on this team. Nunn is like the 3-and-D guy. Edgecombe is kind of undersized for the 3. Omier didn't guard at all at Miami. Langston Love is not known for his defense. I think that is going to be the issue with this team. Jumping from 72nd to 23rd defensively is a pretty big jump. So that's kind of my skepticism here. Really, really strong offensive team. I wish they played faster. Outside the top 200 in tempo the last 3 years, 282nd last season with a top 6 offense. Like, if they go any faster, this team's gonna be so sick for DFS. I was looking at their non-con, Gav. They are really testing themselves. That first night, they're obviously at Gonzaga in that marquee game on Monday night. Then they play a neutral against Arkansas, a neutral against St. John's, and at UConn. That's about as tough as a non-con as you're going to get in the entire country.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. It all comes down to the defense, and there's a lot of questions. St. John's and their length and athleticism against those kind of couple guys, their core 3, I think, bodes well. But yeah, I mean, tough to see it really being bad by any means. But is it potentially not good enough to be top 10? I think it's very easily could not be top 10.
Yeah, I think the way that I'm going to approach them is I'm going to be betting some opponents' team total overs early. I'm just not buying in that the defense is going to be as good as Ken Pom thinks, and especially not right away. You're mixing in the 3 major pieces that are going to be on this team are all new. So that's really my major concern. But man, so much shooting on this team. Roach, Edgecombe, Love, and Omier as well.
Nunn shot it well too.
Yeah, Jaden Nunn. So, all right, let's keep it moving here. Let's go to BYU. Really interesting offseason for them. They lose their coach. Mark Pope goes to Kentucky. They bring in the Phoenix Suns bench coach, Kevin Young, as the new head coach here. Probably the surprise of the entire country last year as far as high majors go. 23-11. They end the season 18 at Ken Pom. Really on the back of just beating the shit out of a lot of people in non-conference. They went 10-8 in conference. Mark Pope brought Jackson Robinson with him to Kentucky. But they bring in, I think, besides Edgecombe, probably the most interesting first-year guy in this conference in the international prospect, Demean. You could probably talk more about him. What do you think about the change in head coaches here and the international prospect coming in?
Yeah, well, probably, like you said, the team that took advantage of the Big 12, quote unquote, being down over the last 3 years. They tied for fifth in the conference with Kansas, in their first year after being projected last in the preseason rankings. So, they got as high as 4th in Ken Pom. It was a top 15 offense year long, finished 18th in Ken Pom. Now they're projected at 21st. You bring in Kevin Young, the Suns bench coach. We think, when you think NBA guy, you think heavy pick and roll, heavy pace and space, a lot of threes. But there's still a lot of projection in that. For what it's worth, I saw an interview where he was talking about, I want to get similar shots that Devin Booker and Kevin Durant get, but leverage the fact that the 3-point line is closer in college and they can still take the same shots that the NBA guys take, which I guess in theory sounds okay, but you got to get the guys to make the shots. This is the team I have the most questions about just coming into the year. Now, the only thing I don't have a question about is them finishing lower than their projected 21st, even if Demean is one of the best freshmen in the country. He's a little bit bigger than Kasparis. He's not the point guard that Kasparis is, but he's basically like a big combo guard almost. Like, he really has solo playmaking ability. He's a legit movement shooter that's going to thrive in this system, I imagine. You retain a decent core of guys, right? Dallin Hall, Trevin Knell, Fu Traore, Richie Saunders, and even get Dawson Baker back from injury. and then add a wingy defender like Mawat Mag. Kevin Cato was an awesome upside guy in the spots that he's had in the last 2 years over at Utah to platoon underneath. So, decent team, but yeah, 21st is pretty egregious. I think, probably better case is middle of the conference, but I really don't know. So I'm not going to be dying on any hills of where this team finishes.
Yeah, they aren't really tested in non-con. Their only non-con games of significance are a neutral against Ole Miss and at Providence. Everything else is outside the top 200. So Kevin Young will have some time to get things dialed in. They definitely surprised me. I was not expecting the season that they had last year. Dallin Hall, really, really solid point guard, 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, like you said, probably pushes 6+ assists per game this season. I think Demeen is going to be awesome. We'll see how he starts out of the gate. And Futrayor, like his issue has always been minutes and injuries, right? 1.16 fantasy points per minute last year and only 18 per game. If he ends up playing 25, 28, something like that, he's going to be a beast for daily fantasy. Undersized big man, but just a grown ass man, as you have in the notes here. Outside of Demeen, this is a pretty old team. They're probably going to start 2-3 grad students. Trayor is a senior. We're just not sure what the coach is going to do. The Suns in the NBA don't really play a deep bench. But who knows how that's going to transfer. I mean, they do have like a direct backup to him in Kibakita. So I don't know. I think this is kind of a wait and see team. Probably fade them early just because of how highly they're ranked. There just aren't that many opportunities to do that in the non-con besides like the Ole Miss game on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I could see us being big on Ole Miss there, but yeah, I mean, it's part of it is when you only have guys like Demeen can't create, we think at the college level. Dallin Hall can create a little bit, but he's definitely not a guy that's just going to break down defenses and generate offense himself. So it's going to have to be schematically driven. And we'll see with Kevin Young.
Yep. All right, let's keep it moving. Let's go to Cincinnati. Cincinnati last season, 22-15. They finished top 40 at KenPom despite going 7-11 in conference. They lose their big man lock-in in the portal. John Newman, Jameel Reynolds gone. They bring in mega athlete Dylan Mitchell from Texas in the portal. But outside of that, not much turnover on this team. I feel like after talking about BYU, we kind of know exactly what we're getting from Cincinnati.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that a lot of people are very high on coming into the year. They finished 11th in the Big 12. It was their first year. They had a better KenPom ranking than a 9 seed in TCU. This year, they're second in the Big 12 in percent of returning minutes. But like you said, they had an elite 2-5 switch wing in Mitchell. Connor Hickman gives them a little bit of mid-major shooting, which we probably need to get to because that's going to be the big issue of this team. And I think kind of one of my more contrarian takes of the conference is that I'm definitely down on this team. I think one of my best takes coming into the year is that Cincinnati is going to be just a dead nut under team with the way that Wes Miller extends pressure. It's not really like press, but it's more like teams don't get into their offense until there's 14, 13 seconds left in the clock type thing just to slow them up. And I really have shooting concerns on this team. 3 guys on this entire team have even 1 year shooting 31% or better from 3. One is Seamus Lukosius, who you got to keep on the floor because of the shooting. The other 2 are CJ Frederick and Connor Hickman. I think Hickman was Bradley. Like a 6'3" Bradley shooter. You can only play maximum of those 2 on the floor, and you probably only optimally want to be playing 1. And you can't take off Seamus because of the versatility that he can provide you playing 2 through 4. So, man, I just have huge concerns. The team is going to be good defensively. It was a top 20 defense last year, but it's been a 79th and 56 offense the last 2 years. And I just don't see how, without crazy steps forward from either like a Skillings from the 3-point line, or even like a Jizzle James, who's not even going to be a full-time point guard with Day Thomas there. Just have major concerns about this offense in a conference with, like I said, a ton of no middle defenses, where if you can't skip the ball and you can't shoot from the perimeter, you're going to have massive issues scoring in isolation and non-schematic base sets.
Yeah, I basically had that exact same note. No one in this team could shoot last year. They were outside the top 200. Skillings, 28%. Jizzle James, 29%. Day Thomas, 28%. Those are going to be the guys, initiating a lot of the offense. Lukosius took 234 last year at 38%. But like you said, outside of him, it's going to be kind of tough. I think the defense is not going to be as good this year either, without Lock-in as kind of the anchor underneath. I'm not sure if you have concerns there, but the team is pretty small. Their top 6 are pretty small. Like, you got Day Thomas, Jizzle James, and Hickman, all 6'3" or smaller. Skillings is a wing. Lukosius is a wing. I guess they start Bendago at center. That would make sense. But I don't know. He's had his own injury issues. Like, if Bendago goes down, I just don't know where the rim protection comes on this team. Maybe that's not as much as a concern as it should be. It's just, I think the Lock-in loss is really, really big on this roster.
Yeah, it doesn't help losing a guy like Victor Lock-in, especially when you have, like you mentioned, Bandago's injury concerns. But I think he's pretty safely kind of like top 5 conference rim protector, definitely towards the back end of that top 5. But he's fine. I'm not worried about him. If he goes down, you can get by with like a Dylan Mitchell center position. You're not going to love it, especially when you're facing a back to the basket big like a Hunter Dickinson. But you can at least get by. It's a little bit smaller, but the defense is going to be so positionally athletic that I think they're just going to fall into being a good defense again. But yeah, when you have an offense that's 34th highest ISO rate in the nation without any NBA creators, 246 in shot selection, 327th in shot making, and it's not like they brought in guys from the portal that make me feel like they're going to improve in that. That's just where the concerns lie. So where they're at 17th, like, I could see this team being outside like the top 30, which is pretty bold compared to people saying that this is like a big sleeper team in the conference. Maybe even like 40th ish. I just think there's so much downside in the struggles that this team could face in the Big 12 offensively.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Like, I thought they overachieved last year just based on the breakout of Dan Skillings that we didn't see coming, and they didn't.
And they finished 11th in the conference.
Yeah, and
they beat one team in the conference that finished inside the top 25 at KenPom. It was at BYU, the first conference game of the season, where BYU just went cold on 45 3-point attempts. So they didn't play up to competition well at all.
Yeah, and they peaked at 29th on KenPom last year. So I'm with you. I will be selling Cincinnati in comparison to the market. Taking a quick peek at their non-con, they got at Georgia Tech the week of Thanksgiving. They're at Villanova, home against Xavier. That's one to circle. That's on that big Saturday, December 14th, Gav. And then a semi-home against Dayton. So reasonably tough non-con 4 games inside the top 75 for Cincy. Any last words here?
Negative.
All right, let's go to probably our quickest preview for the entire Big 12, Colorado. Man, what a season last year for Colorado. 26-11. They finished 24th at KenPom, 13-7 in conference. Massive losses. Obviously, probably the biggest in the entire conference. I think definitely the biggest in the entire conference. They lose 3 guys who are playing in the NBA right now. TDS, KJ Simpson, and Cody Williams. Eddie Lampkin transferred out. Javon Hadley and Luke O'Brien. So basically all of their production from last season outside of Hammond and some Ruffin is gone. Gav, thoughts on last year's Colorado team, and how they're going to transfer into this new season with just so much talent out the door?
Yeah, I mean, it was Tad Boyle's most talented team at Colorado ever. It was their second highest rated KenPom finish behind the McKinley Wright Jabari Walker team. For a team like Colorado to lose three guys in the top 42 picks and then transfer into the Big 12 when you just don't reload at a school like that. Cody Williams is kind of just a lucky get, and now they roll into the season with Julian Hammond and Javon Ruffin as their lead guards, surrounded by, you know, bot NPC Andre Jakumovsky, and hopefully like Bangkok Dat comes along. You know, that's where we're at with Colorado. That Bangkok Dat needs to be a guy. So yeah, this is, I think Colorado's pretty easily bottom two of the conference. We look to play Julian Hammond early in good spots because if he comes in at a good price, and maybe like Dak is a DFS flyer for kind of the early part of the season. But other than that, isn't that a team we need to be paying much attention to whatsoever?
Yeah, this is going to be Hammond, I think, with a good amount of usage. Just hoping that he comes along. They are in that Maui tournament though, Gav. So the week of Thanksgiving, we will have opportunities to fade this Colorado team. KenPom's got them as a 3-point dog, 4-point dog against Sparty on a neutral that week. That is something. That is something that I'm interested in. If you watch the Big Ten show, you know that I'm pretty high on Sparty. All right, let's keep it moving. Let's go to Houston. What a turn going from Colorado to Houston here. Houston preseason number 1 at KenPom. They finished number 2 at KenPom last year, 32-5. Just a ridiculous season. 15-3 in conference. They lose their point guard, of course. Jamal Shed is gone. They bring in the replacement Uzan from Oklahoma, along with the top 60 recruit in Mercy Miller. So, not much turnover as far as number of bodies, but a big loss of point in Shed. How do you think that impacts Houston here, Gav?
Yeah, it's never good losing a guy like Shed. But all Kelvin Sampson has done is finish second, and second the last 3 years in KenPom. They come into the conference the first year, and they just absolutely just run through it. Win the conference, I think, by 2 games. The only thing you kind of can nitpick them at is the fact that there's no Final Fours in the last 3 years, right? Losing Shed, middle of the Sweet 16, I think, obviously didn't help them and probably led, to their downfall, and it's a title contender with them. But yeah, look, you lose him. It's turned out to be really like a once in a decade type point guard for Houston. Just his two-way ability, at least kind of the Houston that we've known in the past. Just now they're starting to get more NBA talent, but replace him with, Milos Uzan from Oklahoma. I mean, nobody's mistaking this for, a 1-for-1 kind of plug and play trade-off, but he's got 56 starts the last 2 years for OU in the Big 12, top 200 assist rate. The 3-point shooting dropped off big time last year on higher volume, which you don't love. But I think I personally have more concerns about Uzan than most people who are going to say, it's Houston. He'll fall in with the culture. He'll be fine. He'll defend, and he'll be elite because he's at best the third option behind Sharp and Cryer. There's some to that. He hasn't been a good half-court player either year, 18th and 35th percentile point per possession his first 2 years, and we know Houston's going to be slow. That being said, yeah, you get to the Cryer-Sharp, the scoring duo that's going to really be the engine of the offense. Like Sharp, I think, is one of the highest ceilings in the conference that is at least untapped to this point. Cryer's probably a lock for 16, 17 points and to be a legit 3-point threat. But the front court is like the freakiest part of this team, right?
It's gnarly.
Javier Francis, Joseph Tugler, and Juwan Roberts. These are like two is a +11 wingspan. Francis is a +9. Roberts is a +8. Just the amount of length and athleticism that Houston throws at you with their pressure defense. It's actually the only team in the country that's actually fun to watch play defense, just how ferocious they do it. So yeah, you wax poetic about a team that we know is probably just a stone block to be the top 5, one of the top in the conference for percent of returning minutes, replace it with still a very suitable point guard. And it's kind of just at some point overall on the team level, not as much Uzan specifically, but overall on the team level. They're going to defend. They're going to be right there. It's probably a lock top 3 defense. And God forbid if they get Terrence Arsenault back from his Achilles, which is still up in the air. Just another elite positional defender. Just tons that they have.
Was Houston the team last year that you found that rogue bet to be a 1 seed?
Yes.
At like plus money. I think
is that I think that was 2 years ago.
But it was Houston, right?
Yeah, they opened up to be a 1 seed at like plus 550 when Gonzaga was like minus money. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you should take a peek and see if you can find that again this year, because I think this team by far has the highest floor in the entire country. They're so deep. They're so talented. Like I have some concerns with Uzan too, but Gav, like if it doesn't fully work out, they have Malik Wilson, they have Ramon Walker, who both played last year. Both are seniors and grad students. So like, I feel like there's insurance at every single spot on this roster. Like they're pretty immune from injuries as far as like a huge drop off if a guy has to miss a couple games. Like you said, they're going to be impossible to score on, especially inside. Juwan Roberts, like the unsung hero, doesn't even ask to really score, just gets it done every single night. Grown ass man. LJ Cryer, though, Gab, I think is the breakout like superstar on this team. He scored 15.5 points a game last year with Shed on the roster. I think we see 18 plus, which is a lot for a team that's going to be bottom 15 in tempo, right? So I think Cryer is a really good bet to be first team all conference this season. 3 straight years, 39 plus 3-point shooter on 8 plus attempts per game. Yeah, this roster's sick. I think for DFS is going to be a bit frustrating in the front court, but like Cryer and Sharp, I think are going to be 33 plus minutes a game guys, especially in their big games. Like we've seen them kind of take the foot off the gas pedal in non-con against the shittier teams. They did really load up their non-con though. They've got that first Saturday against Auburn where they're playing at the Rockets Arena. And then, we'll be in Vegas and see them play Bama and Notre Dame back to back. That Houston-Bama game is going to be absolutely gnarly. They play Rutgers that Saturday in Vegas. And then their other non-con, it's not great, but it's not like they have a bunch of teams outside the top 300. Like the other 4 games around that trip to Vegas are all within the top 175. And then they also have a game against Butler. So they are going to be tested early and often. I do like that he did this with the experienced roster because I think they can just rack up wins around the 2 games against Auburn and Bama, which are like the, hey, are we going to be Final Four type good?
Yeah, I mean, I bet he's loading up the non-con more this year than he has in years prior, probably due to some of the experiences that they've had losing in the tournament. Like they want to get the more of those atmospheres of when they were playing Bama last year. Where was that game? Was it in like Birmingham? I can't remember, but playing these really tough non-con schedules rather than just pasting these shit teams by 50 to help their analytical ranking, which they're great at doing. So yeah, not much more to say. Easy top 5. I think personally having Kansas to be better than this team in the conference is crazy. Maybe I'm wrong. I think this is the team to win the conference. Like if Kansas beats them, so be it. But I think this team is like a lock to win 15 games, probably upwards of 16 or 17.
Yeah, like I said, the best floor in the entire country. 3 straight awesome teams here that we'll talk about. The next is Iowa State. Iowa State 29-8 last year, Gab. Number 8 overall at Ken Palmas, where they ended up 13-5 in conference. Their offseason was basically shuffling out their front court for new pieces. Why don't you talk about the change in the front court here, because the back court is untouched, and we'll get to them later.
Yeah, I mean, they finished second last year. Again, another team like Houston, extremely high in percent of returning minutes in the conference. It was actually the number 1 defense last year. third in the conference in returning minutes. So another team, I think, like Houston, it has a super high floor just inherently. On other teams, losing 3 front court guys, and if you even think about going to the year prior, you lose Trey King, you lose Rob Jones, and you lose Hassan Ward last year. You also lose Oshun Ashuni from the year prior. Most teams, I think that would affect it more, but Iowa State, this has been the number 1 near proximity defense frequency back-to-back years. They just keep teams away from the rim at the highest rate in the country, which allows you to be a little bit smaller. Hold on one sec. They also bring in the front court DeSean Jackson. Jackson was like kind of a highly touted guy at Washington State coming in, doesn't really pan out, goes to Charlotte, is a 7-footer with a national ranking and block percentage, is supposedly a pretty good defender. If he's going to be a good rim protector, then I have no worries about, shipping out kind of the 3 guys that didn't really do much. The other guy that you bring in is Josh Jefferson. Any St. Mary's guy, you'll see me taking the pants off and getting the knee pads out for. This was the St. Mary's defender. He is one of the best wing defenders in the nation, up there with like the Kobe Johnsons of the world. He missed the back half of last year with a knee injury, but he's also an elite.
What a perfect fit between him and Otts.
Yeah, I mean, I think like when I looked, I sent you that Iowa State has like 3 of the top 8 defensive BPRs coming into the year from last year, with Keyshawn Gilbert, Tamin Lipsey, and Josh Jefferson. Milan Momcilovic is gonna fill his role. Shot 36% on good volume, a true freshman year. So perfect. Go play the 4, go play the 3 at spots. And then you have probably is this the best guard tandem in the conference? I think so, with what Keyshawn Gilbert did last year.
Yes, it is.
Coming in from UNLV, I mean, like the 104 O rating doesn't like blow your socks off, but it was kind of the AJ Storr 104, 105-ish O rating. It's what he meant to the team creating wise. He had a naturally ranked assist rate. It was playmaking. It was an offense like devoid of shot creators other than him. So like he upped his points per game, his rebounds per game, and his assists per game, moving from the Mountain West to the Big 12. So yeah, Tamin Lipsey, Keyshawn Gilbert, and God forbid if DeSean Jackson pans out, like this, again, another extremely elite team. You also return 2 shooters, or not return, but return 1 shooter in Curtis Jones, 35% on 200 attempts last year, and bring in like Nate Heisey was extremely good at Northern Iowa, 35% on 129 attempts, but also brings a little bit more playmaking from the wing spot. There's a lot more tools than Otts, I think, has ever had at Iowa State, offensively, at least speaking. So have no issues about this team. Probably another lock top 10 team Tamin Lipsey could be, I wouldn't be surprised if we look up and he's like legit one of the 10 best players in the country, like 2/3 of the way through.
I like this team more than I liked him last year. You talked about the Lipsey-Gilbert tandem, both top 50 in steal rate. Lipsey 6th nationally in steal percentage. This team turns you over. You can't score on them inside. And Lipsey was playing through an injury the entire season. We didn't really get to see his true ceiling, I think. For DFS for us, it was a bit frustrating at times. I think this is the year where he becomes a national star if he stays healthy. Just slams the box score. Probably the best peripheral guard in the conference, I would say, for sure. And probably, top 5 nationally behind guys like Kadari Richmond, Davon Smith, guys like that. The team just fits so well together. I think replacing, the Trey King, Robert Jones, Hassan Ward with Josh Jefferson and DeSean Jackson, I think elevates the ceiling of this team just because I think those guys, are better overall players. And I think that they have more offensive upside than the 3 guys that you lost. Like the scheme and the fit is going to be good defensively regardless. I think the Jefferson Jackson combo just elevates the scoring ceiling of this team. That's what, everyone going into the tournament said the same thing, right? If they can score 70 points, they're going to beat anyone. They finished last season 52nd in adjusted offensive efficiency. A lot of that was Lipsy was hurt and playing through injury, but they really didn't get anything offensively from their 4 and 5 spots the entire season, Gav.
Yeah, other than kind of, roll man dunks, dunker spots, offensive rebound putbacks. Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that Lipsy battled through injury can't be overstated. And I don't think I've heard anybody say this in any preview. Like, he was 12 and a half points, 4.5 rebounds, and 5 assists per game with like a bum shoulder, basically the back half of the year. God, if that's healthy with more weapons around him, like it's pretty scary. It could look a lot like Kolek statistically, in all honesty. They're not going to play with the pace, so he might lose a little bit on the counting stats. But boy, like it could be an incredible year for him, fully healthy with more weapons.
Yeah, this team is sick. I think I would have them over Kansas. I think this is the second best team in the conference. It took me some time for them to grow on me last year, but I am all in this year. My tiebreaker is always, what's your top 2 guard tandem? And they've got the best one in the conference, so I will ride behind that. Just a quick peek at their non-con. They also play Auburn. Is Auburn playing every top 10 team in the first month
Apparently,
of the season? Yeah. They are playing Auburn on a neutral the week of Thanksgiving, and then they play Marquette in early December at home. They're at Iowa, and the rest of their opponents are outside the top 300. So they'll have 3 tests, and they'll absolutely put the clamps on and beat the piss out of a bunch of teams outside the top 300. Any last words on the Cyclones here, Gav?
Nope.
All right, let's go to the third of the trio. I think this is the third best team of the trio. I think that we actually, we always go in alphabetical order. I think I agree with the alphabetical order. You're Houston, Iowa State, Kansas. Kansas coming off a 23-11 season, 27th overall at Ken Palm is where they ended up, 10-8 in conference. Bit of a disappointing season overall for Kansas last year, based on the hype coming into the year and just kind of how they finished. They, of course, lose Kevin McCullough. They lose Johnny Furphy to the draft. But I think the biggest thing, Gav, is this team finally has some depth. We saw last year Self just refused to play the bench because he could not get anything out of Nick Timberlake, Jamari McDowell, all those bums off the bench. So he went in the portal and picked up some really, really nice pieces. AJ Storr from Wisconsin, Rylan Griffin, probably the best 3-and-D guy in the entire portal. Zeke Mayo is a stud at Dakota State. And they bring in a top 20 recruit. Probably won't play too much, but it just gives them options. It just gives them, you don't have to play guys 37 minutes a game against, the number 300 team on Ken Palm. What do you think about the offseason for Kansas and the moves that they made?
Yeah, well, they needed to. The 27th ranked finish on Ken Palm was tied for Bill Self's worst ever finish in Ken Palm since he started at Kansas in 2004. It was a disaster. They had, obviously health was an issue. I mean, McCullough missed a bunch of time. Dickinson not only missed time, but also battled through injuries, even playing. But just bringing back the Dickinson, DeJuan Harris, KJ Adams floor with the AJ Storr, Rylan Griffin, Zeke Mayo, it allows your top 6 to be right there with anyone in the country. And then, there's even kind of okay depth pieces in Shaquille Moore, David Coit, and then Flory, the 5-star Frost. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think this is a team that's going to get deep into the bench, but like when you think about this team, basically got a luck box Johnny Furphy draft year, which was not on anybody's radar coming into the year, and they still only finished 27th in Ken Palm. Goes to show why Bill Self just said screw it and decided to just pillage the portal, and they got these guys quickly too. it was early, like Kansas got these guys. So yeah, it's going to be right there in the country with anybody in the country. You know, the 59th best offensive efficiency last year was Bill Self's worst finish since 1999 at Tulsa, right? Like it was
That's
a
wild.
historically bad Kansas year. Rylan Griffin, 84th percentile catch and shoot guy. Zeke Mayo, 93rd percentile catch and shoot guy. Storr is kind of the creator of those, who kind of like I mentioned with Keyshawn Gilbert, wasn't a blow your socks off O rating guy, but also had to handle just a mega workload on a super slow tempo, half court based team with no shot creation, and basically did it all on himself.
Just a necessary score on those teams, you know?
Yeah. And then the other thing is, like, Bill Self has had one non-top 25 Ken Palm defense since he started at Kansas. So I'm going to trust him on that side of the ball. The last year was the 3, right? They were 334th in 3-point rate, 195th in 3-point percentage. And even when you score 30th best 2-point percentage, that's like how you barely make a top 60 offensive efficiency. It's the math ball, the analytics, whatever. I looked at a team similarly, South Carolina. Similar 3-point percentage rank. They were 180th versus KU's 195th, but they were the 85th 3-point rate, right? They were the 42nd best offensive efficiency, and they were 149th in 2-point percentage, not 30th. So that just goes to show you kind of what KU was definitely lacking, and they brought it in, you know, at least in spades within those two guys. You know, if Storr can be a catch and shoot guy, there's weird reports that, I don't know, he's forgotten how to play basketball now that he went to Bill Self, and that they don't know how to implement him right, which, you know, is interesting. But you're anchored by probably, you know, for my money, the front runner player of the year. Like Hansborough, his year was 22.5 and 10. Dickinson last year was 18 and 11 with no spacing, battling through injury. Just had Edey, you know, in the country. So didn't really get as many accolades as he probably should have. So yeah, they'll be fine. I think probably a little more upside than an Iowa State, but I don't mind anybody saying they're the third best. I think I probably have them. I'll call it even and say they tie with Iowa State behind Houston.
To be fair, I think all three teams are like top 6, 7 teams in the country. So
yeah, they could legit be 3 of the top 5 teams.
Yeah. Hunter Dickinson, 1.21 fantasy point per minute last season in the year where he battled injuries throughout. I think this is a 20 and 12 type year for him. I think he wins National Player of the Year if he doesn't get hurt. We gave that away early in the summer at a pretty good number for him. Yeah, I mean, the top 6, 7 of this team is just sick, right? Dwan Harris, I've never been a huge fan of, just as far as the upside. Like to me, he's like a Jeremy Roach. Like he's a steady, high floor guy, not going to lose you games, but probably not going to win you very many games. AJ's like, it's exactly what you said. Like Self, such a good coach, like goes in the portal, identifies like the 2 or 3 weaknesses he had and brings in like the perfect pieces for it. Storr, Griffin, and Zeke Mayo are all just awesome fits on this team. Dickinson's going to have a lot more space to work with. Rylan Griffin, I think, is just a perfect fit. Like I said, 39% from 3 on over 5 attempts per game, 121 O rating last year. Everything just fits. And like I said, to kind of kick off the preview here, just having options off the bench in case Adams has to miss a game, or Dwan Harris gets sick or something. Like they just couldn't weather that last season. They didn't have even like a 6th man, and I think this team is they have 8 to 9 actual options. So I think that I think the biggest thing is who they brought in and the fit. And then the second biggest is just having options where, you can actually go to the bench if guys are hurt. Like Kevin McCullough was playing through stuff that he probably shouldn't have last year, just because Bill Self is like, we're not fucking playing Elmarco Jackson again. Like, get your ass out there, Kevin. So yeah, I do like this team. I think it's a top probably eight team in the country. Really, really tough non-con as always with Bill Self. In November, they play home against Carolina the first Friday of the season. That'll be awesome. Michigan State on a neutral. That's the Champions Classic, the second week of the year. A neutral against Duke on Thanksgiving week. They play at Creighton. They play at Mizzou. They play NC State. Not many cupcakes in their non-con. So they get off and running right away. Any last thoughts here on Kansas?
No, I think, you mentioned DeJuan Harris. Like he was forced into the second, third scoring option role last year with how thin they were. Now he's basically back in the role that he's suited for, which is only shoot when you're at the rim and there's nobody within 3 feet of you.
That's true.
Kind of thing. So, yeah, hard to argue. Don't have anything else to add. Cool.
Let's go to K-State. K-State last year, 19-15. They end up 70th at KenPom, 8-10 in conference. They lose their big three from last year, if you want to call it that. Tyler Perry, Cam Carter, Kaluma, all gone. Those guys played huge minutes and were basically all of their usage last season. Didn't translate to much, obviously, finishing 70th at KenPom. So they go in the portal, and they spend some money in the portal, Gav. Doug McDaniel, the point guard from Michigan, comes over. Coleman Hawkins, a huge get from Illinois. Core from Sanford. Onyenso, some front court depth from Kentucky, and a couple of other pieces. Pretty big overhaul here at K-State, Gav, for Jerome Tang. He's a coach that I know you like. What do you think about the offseason moves? It seems like he wasn't very happy with the efficiency of his top 3 guys last year.
Yeah, I mean, it was not a great year. They tied for 9th in the Big 12. It was the 3rd worst offense in the conference. They also had the 4th best defense. It was a top 25 defense nationally. The Naquan Tomlin being dismissed first week of the season, I think was less than optimal, being very conservatively speaking about that. There's also some things that when you look at more into the shot regression, kind of on the nerdy side, this was a team that ran extremely pure on the defensive side with opponent shot making. There's 2+ points of regression in the mid range, 3-point, free throw, post up, everywhere. Last year they were 345th in turnover percentage. I don't even understand how you're that bad as a power conference team. Even they were 259th the year prior. Tang's going to let his guys play. But Tyler Perry and David Gasson were the only sub 20% turnover guys, and Perry was 19.6. They just could not hold on to the basketball.
21.1% of their possessions, they turn the ball over.
Can you imagine that? Just literally handing the other team the ball 1 out of every 5 possessions is insanity. But yeah, Doug comes in. The turnover rate was good, not great. 15.6%. Also had a high usage role, surrounded by a bunch of bots on a dead team. So we'll see. He's going to be a similar non-factor defensively, just like Perry was. Unlike Noel. Noel was definitely more of a point of attack defender. But yeah, Coleman Hawkins is kind of the jewel, I think, of the late portal season. 2.5-year starter, 3rd team All Big Ten. He probably goes from being the number 3 to 4 option to being maybe the number 1 or 2 guy. He's never had a usage rate above 20% on KenPom. So there still even might be upside in the counting stats if he can find, another path to 31+ minutes like he did last year. But when you have guys like Ugana Onyenso, who has the upside to be one of the best rim protectors in the conference, maybe the best. He's a great roll man, great dunker spot, but he's also a guy positionally siloed to the center spot. You have a core. He played the center at Sanford at 6'9", which means he's not going to get the same matchup advantages that he had at the mid-major level. He's going to be more in the 3-4 role. But, national rankings, O rating wise, both sides rebounding, top 50 in block, 44% from threes on moderate volume. So he's definitely going to aid that, right? The other issue was the 3-point percentage, 285th in 3-point percentage last year. Not great, Jim. So you add Brendan Housen, from Villanova, whatever. Brendan Housen is what he is. He's 44% from 3 in Big East play. He was 38% on the year total, 43% on the year prior. Fills a role. Max Jones, Cal State Fullerton. My Big West guys. I mean, he was. You know who was the dude of Fullerton 2 years ago?
Who?
Latrell Wrightsell. So I'm
Yep.
not saying that Max Jones, Latrell Wrightsell, but this is a guy that missed the final 7 games of the year. He was 39% from 3 on 4.5 attempts per game. He was assisted on over 70% of them, which leads me to believe that he can play off the ball, which he's going to have to with Doug, 83rd percentile catch and shoot guy, and a guy who's terrible at the rim. So hopefully that curbs it going to a power conference where he's not going to be able to get into the key. So yeah, I'm definitely more bullish than the 49th ranking on KenPom. I think where Torvik has him 25th is kind of where I see it as well. I don't know how much more ceiling there is. I don't know if it's top 15. It might be top 20 ceiling, but floor is probably kind of 35 to 40 range. Ultimately, this is one of those teams that, like, I think after Hawkins signed, there was, I can't remember what book had it, but there was a 300-1 out there on them. I was like, yeah, sure, why not? They're going to go into a lot of games in the tournament with Coleman Hawkins and Doug McDaniel as like a high single-digit seed. That might be the 2 best players on the floor in some games. So I took that for shits. But ultimately, the team I think I like to improve, but don't know how they quite crack into the top 2 tiers of the conference.
Yeah, 8 of their top 9 guys are new, Gassan being the only guy back from last year. So this is definitely a tear it down and bring in your own pieces, which, there are a lot of people who bitch about the transfer portal, some ex coaches included. I think it's cool, You're like, hey, this didn't work. I can build my own team the way I want. I'm going to bring in pieces that I think fit together. And I think Tang did that. Coleman Hawkins, I think that there's no way that he came to Kansas State to be the 3rd or 4th fiddle on this team, Gavin. I think this is the explosion here for Coleman Hawkins usage-wise. What a 6'6" player as a complementary piece on a good team last year. Averaged 12, 6, and 3, shot 37% from 3. I think Hawkins is the star here. I think he's like outside chance for all conference. I think the upside is there for him. Doug had the super odd season at Michigan, like you said, where like couldn't travel for road games. I just like the fit of this team more. They are small in the front court. Doug McDaniel doesn't really help that, being 5'10", 5'11". I think what'll be interesting to watch early, Gav, is how the front court shakes out, because they do have a lot of bodies. We've talked about several teams throughout our previews that don't really have that much front court depth. This team's got it. This team's got Hawkins, Onyenso, Gassan, Akor, Bayfall from Arkansas is there too. So there's a lot of bodies that kind of scares me for DFS purposes, because like we want to play Akor. We want to play Onyenso because the rates are so good, but these guys for DFS purposes could just eat each other alive.
Yeah, it's going to be the Doug show DFS wise. But yeah, I think ultimately the upside of this team, like is the highest ceiling lineup playing the Hawkins, Onyenso, Akor lineup. I don't even know if that's it, or if it's playing Gassan with Akor and Hawkins. But is it, do you play 2 or do you play 3 of those guys? And if not, do you get better spacing? Do you rebound better? It's going to be an interesting team. Definitely a team I want to be gathering data points on early, but still a team I feel good about long term.
Yeah, quick peek of their non-con, fairly easy overall. Their only game in November against top 100 is home against LSU. They are at St. John's December 7th. Circle that one, Gav. And then they end non-con with Drake and Wichita State, which are some interesting games against, probably teams that are right around that 100th point on KenPom. All right, let's go to your alma mater. Let's go to Oklahoma State. 12-20. My poor uncle gets fired. Mike Boynton is gone after ending the season 117th, going 4-14 in conference. Wasn't really a good run there for him, outside of getting a couple of top recruits to go to OK State. They do bring in Steve Lutz from Western Kentucky, previously at Corpus Christi. Gav, if there's one thing we know about him, is that the games are going to be fun for DFS. The roster is basically gone with Boynton, and Lutz brings in his own guys. The only returners are Bryce Thompson and Keller from last year. What are your thoughts about Lutz and who they bring in here?
Yeah, it's interesting. Lutz is almost on the Danny Sprinkle coaching ascend, where you just go school to school to school year after year. Third school in 3 years for him. But yeah, number one tempo last year, Western Kentucky, fourth fastest average offensive possession length. It's a low 3-point rate team. They're going to put a lot of pressure on the rim, 60th highest ISO rate. Definitely works better in the CUSA than the Big 12, where if you take the air out of the ball against teams like Houston, against teams like Iowa State, you're just going to get eaten alive. But yeah, you lose the kind of Javal Small engine. You lose all the frosh upside of Brandon Garrison and Eric Daly. Now you have just kind of a lot of super meh depth at like the Big 12 level. Bryce Thompson, who scorched in their scrimmage, he also missed the last 2 months with a torn shooting shoulder labrum. And I tore my labrum in my quote unquote shooting shoulder, which was also my pitching shoulder. And it's not an easy thing to come back from. He also had 4 years as a sub 100 O rating before that. So it's not like a guy that, he tears his shoulder, I'm going to feel way better about his offensive upside.
Torn shoulder labrum ended my baseball career.
Yeah, you bring in a mental basket case like Devo Davis, who stepped away from the team last year. There was all sorts of wild fucking rumors if you want to go down the rabbit hole on what he got involved in. He's a plus defender, but he's another sub 100 O rating guy. He was great surrounded by 3 NBA guys, and then was terrible last year. Brandon Newman. I have to say my favorite Brandon Newman stat, right?
Yeah.
Brandon Newman was the runner-up for Mr. Indiana basketball his senior year of high school to Trace Jackson Davis. Okay, Trace Jackson Davis spent a half a decade in college and is now in his second year in the NBA. And Brandon Newman is still in college. Okay, he comes with Steve Lutz from Western Kentucky, like another sub 100 O rating guy, 74 O rating versus tier A and B. 31% 3-point shooter. Maybe he's a good defender that can put pressure on the rim. You bring in Abu Usman, who somehow upped his 5 fouls per 40 at North Texas.
He was fucking terrible at Xavier.
To a staggering 6.3 fouls per 40 at Xavier. It was terrible offensively. The rebounding sustained because he's just so athletic and long. But yeah, that's what you get from Usman. And then Arturo Dean is probably the other only guy to highlight. Like, he'll be the sixth man here. He was a stocks animal on a mega high press rate FIU team. He was not even a sub 100 O rating guy. He was a sub 90 O rating guy on nuclear usage. The steal percentage was number 1 in the nation at the same time. So will that hold at the Big 12 level? It did against 6 tier A, B competition. But yeah, he had 12 stocks against FAU and UCF. So I don't know. This team is who was the team that we just talked about? SMU, you just bring in a bunch of random kind of okay players and you stay afloat in the conference 1 year, show people you'll get in for NIL, and then you can kind of build from there.
Yeah, I think this team has a chance to finish dead last in the conference with this roster. But man, they're going to be fun for DFS. So we are going to have to dial in the rotations here. Luckily for us, they probably won't be on many slates early. I think their only game against anyone in the top 100-ish is FAU Thanksgiving week. They've got Seton Hall in Oklahoma in mid-December. But yeah, like you said, Steve Lutz, number 1 tempo in the entire country last year. The issue on that team, Gav, top 30 in bench minutes as far as DFS is concerned. So maybe it's play opponents against Oklahoma State this year.
Yeah, I think that's honestly the way to look at it. We didn't bring up Khalil Brantley. Like, he was the 1B to Jameer Brekus at LaSalle. He's like a 32% 3-point shooter, and 75% of all his twos were far twos. So it's not like a guy that can get pressure at the rim, even at the mid-major level, in an offense that's going to be relying on getting to the rim. Like, he's just going to kind of be, I think, a point guard bot, Marcellus Avery. Okay.
I think he's the interesting guy for DFS.
He showed some flashes. and I think just the fact that Usman's going to foul his ass off every game probably puts him in a spot to get more minutes. There is Bob Jennings from Texas Tech, who, when Warren Washington was out, was like, okay, was a serviceable center replacement. But yeah, other than that, I don't know. I don't even know where the upside really exists on this team, to be honest, other than maybe if Avery gets a 30-minute role and has some sort of kind of unforeseen breakout.
Yeah, it's going to be rough. And they ease right into conference play, Gav. They play Houston to start the Big 12 play. We'll be playing a lot of guys against Oklahoma State this year. Let's go to TCU, 21-13 last year, 43rd at KenPom. Another solid year for TCU, 9-9 in conference, but they lose their heart and soul. Their best player, Emmanuel Miller, is gone. They also lose Jameer Nelson, Peavy, Avery Anderson, Chuck O'Bannon. Two pretty big pickups, though, in the portal in Frankie Collins and Traz White from UNC Wilmington. What do you think about the offseason for TCU?
Yeah, I mean, TCU. You tie for 7th in the Big 12. You get a 9 seed, and you just get absolutely pasted by Utah State shooting in the first round. Then you lose Emmanuel Miller and Micah Peavy. You also have the lowest returning % of minutes for any team in the conference with a returning coach. I think the only team below him is West Virginia with a new coach. Jamie Dixon has 0 winning Big 12 records in 8 years at TCU. He had 10 winning records in 13 years at Pitt between the Big East and the ACC, and 2 of those years came the final years before he left. So it's pretty tough to kind of see how the team previously loses all that they do, imports a lot of mid-major talent, returns Ernest Uday, and improves where they were last year. I just don't see how this is a tourney team, even with a Frankie Collins, who I think is really going to thrive in the system. A great point of attack defender, is going to get to the rim. We've seen elite rim attacking guards succeed under Jamie Dixon. If it's Mike Miles, if it's Damian Baugh, if even Jameer Nelson, started kind of coming on later in the year as really just a main slashing point guard. So, you also bring in Noah Reynolds, the Horizon newcomer of the year. He's another kind of like slashing high usage guard, wasn't a high volume 3-point guy, better off the dribble, bad catch and shoot numbers. Traz White, I think, is really interesting. UNC Wilmington transfer, first team, all Colonial, like an elite O rating that also sustained versus A and B competition. Was kind of like a core, 6'9", 2-ish, 3-pointers per game at 39%. You'll take that. So maybe he has kind of a breakout opportunity going into a more full-time, steady, consistent role. He didn't even start many games for Wilmington. It was kind of a weird year, but the piece that's most interesting for TCU that I haven't heard enough people highlight is Vashawn Alette.
Yeah.
This is a really under the radar recruit from Canada who went into ODU and absolutely was thrashing until he was dismissed by the interim coach 17 games in for quote unquote conduct unbecoming to a Monarch or whatever Old Dominion's mascot is. I don't know if that's I don't know if that's beating a woman. I don't know if that's failing a drug test. I have no idea what that is. But if TCU is going to take him on immediately, I'm going to assume that it's relatively minor, probably on the drug testing side. But this was a guy who, like, when he stopped, this is a true frosh, 17.5, 6 boards and 3 assists per game. Elite downhill burst, elite finishing ability. He's got playmaking chops as like a wide body guard. I mean, he's a gambler on defense, so he's gonna put up stocks. Like this is a really, really interesting piece that we need to keep an eye on, not only for DFS but just kind of for TCU long term. That I think could be a real factor in the Big 12.
Yeah, I kind of like the upside swings that he took in the portal. A lot of the guys he left, they didn't transfer. They just they ran out of eligibility. He's trying to reload here in the portal. This kind of seems like a better version of the Arizona State situation, Gav, where you have a coach that hasn't really gotten it done, brings in a bunch of mid-major, like mega usage scores, kind of feels similar. And it is funny because this team has Arizona State's point guard.
I was going to say with the former ASU point guard. Yeah.
Yeah. I think TCU is on a different tier in this conference than Arizona State, surely. I'll be interested to see how this meshes. I mean, they have 4 guys who can legit score around a center that we think is going to take another jump, former 5-star guy, without much depth behind Uday. I think we should talk about him more. This team doesn't have much depth outside of freshmen. Like their top 6 or 7. Their top 6 is Collins, Reynolds, Traz White, Alette, Wenzel, Uday. And we'll see how much they go into the bench this year, Gav. Jamie Dixon used it more than usual last year, but he also had more pieces to play with. We'll see about these freshmen. He doesn't bring in any, top 100 type guys. I think Micah Robinson is the top freshman, number 81. So I think we could see the rotation kind of tighten up a bit. And I think these guys are going to be good in DFS, if that's the case.
I think Uday is going to be just a mega smash early until they adjust his price. Jesus, if you told me like Zuby Ejiofor had Uday's role, I'd be taking like 1,000-to-1 player of the year shots on him kind of thing. Like, I mean, Uday basically has, and that more speaks to the role that Uday should have. Like there's literally 2 unranked non-top 150 guys behind him that are taller than like 6'7". And Brandon Wenzel's 6'7", and he's playing the Trevion Tennyson role coming over from Wyoming, just literally being a standing corner shooter. So yeah, I don't see overall how this team improves, on a 43 KenPom ranking last year. So I'm probably good with where KenPom is, 58th wise, maybe a little bit low. I think there's a little bit more downside. But they're going to play fast. They're going to force turnovers. And if they're not playing Uday, Collins, and Traz White on the floor at the same time, then there's going to be mega defensive ineptitudes that we're going to need to exploit on the other side opponent wise. So.
Yeah, I think this team's going to be fun. Like there are a lot of teams that we've talked about where it's like, I think TCU games are going to be fun just with the guys that they're going to have on the court, the pace that they're going to play with. Quick peek of their non-con here before we move on. Mid-November, they're at Michigan. They play Santa Clara on a neutral on Thanksgiving. Home against Xavier. Semi-home against Vandy. So 4 top 100 games in the non-con. They'll be on a couple of slates for us early. Any last thoughts here?
Negative.
All right, let's go to a team that I really like. Let's go to Texas Tech. Texas Tech last year, 23-11. They finished 31st at KenPom, 11-7 in conference. Gavin, I was bummed when Torvik and KenPom had them bumped up higher than where they finished last year. I was hoping to be higher than the market on this team based on what they did in the offseason. They lose Pop Isaacs. We talked about him on the Big East show. Joe Toussaint, Warren Washington, Bob Jennings, who we just talked about, are all gone. But 2 of the best transfer portal pickups in the entire conference. Elijah Hawkins was so good at Minnesota last season, especially with the injuries that they had with Dawson Garcia having to miss time. And JT Toppin, I want you to talk about him coming in from New Mexico, tested the draft waters, probably would have gotten drafted, but goes to Texas Tech here for what I assume is pretty good chunk of NIL money.
Yeah, I mean, Grant McCaslin is like one of the best young coaches that not enough people are discussing. He waltzes into the Big 12 his first year, and all Texas Tech dug is tied for 3rd. They start at 45th on KenPom. They finish finished 31st with the 27th best offense, and that was with a high usage, inefficient Pop Isaacs as kind of the main driver, right? Like, dude, last year this team had Joe Toussaint. Like, Joe Toussaint couldn't get minutes on Iowa, Joe Toussaint had to go to West Virginia because Joe Toussaint is not good at basketball. And now they bring in Elijah Hawkins, who was a top 10 assist rate guy nationally, on just a completely dead offense in Minnesota, where, yeah, you had Cam Christie, you had Mike Mitchell, who were effective 3-point shooters, but Kerwin Walton and Chance McMillan have been two of the best catch and shoot 3-point guys in the country. Like McMillan's going to step into more of a starting role for sure here. And JT Toppin, yeah, I am surprised he didn't get drafted. This was a guy almost of the I hate to bring him up after his bad injury, but very much of the Taylor Hendricks ilk, where he comes from being like a guy outside the top 100, almost not quite Reed Shepherd, where you go from outside the top 100 to whatever top 3 overall pick. But I mean, he went from, a non-top 100 guy, like I think he was 130-ish, to being like a freshman All-American, nationally top 40 O rating, top 30 offensively rebounding, top 150 defensively rebounding, top 50 block rate, 54th best 2-point percentage. And it sustained well against tier A, B in 16 games. I mean, it's legit one of the highest portal upsides in the country, just because one of age, and that he might not even be really fully getting there on his trajectory curve. Could be, I don't know. I haven't heard much about it, but like if we pick our heads up and he's a top 20 pick, kind of like where De Silva went last year, I wouldn't be that surprised at all. This is one of the best gets of the portal, a guy who can even play small ball 5. You lose Warren Washington and you get Federico. So nice they named him twice, which isn't great, but Toppin playing small ball 5 can alleviate a lot of that.
I think they should. I think Toppin as a small ball 5, like with Cambridge and Williams on the wing, I think works.
Yeah, I think that is the upside of the team. And like if Toppin can develop a 3-point game, then boy, like that's only going to just accelerate his NBA upside. So it's definitely a swing skill that he's working on in the offseason. If that develops and he can play the small ball 5 against a lot of these, rim compact defenses in the Big 12, then yeah, this team is really scary. But, then Ken Pom has them ranked 14th. I didn't quite think that they would grasp the magnitude of an Elijah Hawkins get compared to a Joe Toussaint, losing a Washington with only replacing Federico and not quite quantifying Toppin. But no, they're right on it. I mean, Ken Pom's at 14th, Torvik's at 19th. I think that's pretty much right where they're at. This is going to be a probably low to mid single digit seed in the tournament and definitely be second weekend viable.
Yeah, I think there's a team that, if there's anyone in the conference that pushes that top 3, I think Texas Tech has got to be in the conversation with Arizona and Baylor. I honestly do. I just love the roster. I love the starting 5. Darian Williams, what a get he was coming in from the Mountain West. He shot 45% from 3 last year. Just an awesome season for
one
Darian
of the quietest breakouts, like not even in the conference in the country.
I know. Elijah Hawkins, who we talked about, tied for second in the nation in assists per game with a guy named Braden Smith. 7.5 assists per game, like you said, on a really bad Minnesota team. I think him, Chance McMillan. So also this team is old outside of Toppin. I'm not sure if you mentioned that, Gav. Their top 6 players, 2 of them are 5th-year seniors, 3 of them are seniors, and then you have JT Toppin. So Kerwin Walton, out of nowhere, shot 48% from 3 on 136 attempts, 8th best nationally. We dogged him on this show last year, and he pretty much shoved it right up our asses. So, he's a nice bench piece all of a sudden. So really, really like the top 6, 7 of this team. I agree with you. I think Federico not being part of the starting lineup probably increases the ceiling of this team, just because you get, both of the wing athletes on the court at the same time with a JT Toppin. So, yeah, I love this team. My last note here, Gav, we saw McCaslin play super, super slow before he came over to Texas Tech when he was at North Texas. Before last season, he had talked about playing faster with, having better athletes and better players overall and more talent. And to give him credit, he did that. So he was outside the top 350 in tempo the last 4 seasons at UNT, 232nd. So, that's a meaningful increase in pace, Gav, because, coming in last year, we didn't think that we were going to be playing basically any Texas Tech guys in DFS. And, they did end up being viable partly because of that jump in pace.
And they're going to be deeper this year. We haven't even brought up Devin Cambridge is basically a portal get. The fact that he only played 8 games last year before injury, that's almost a portal get. Didn't play any Big 12 games. Like, they're deeper. They could even run quicker. Defensively is going to be interesting to monitor because, North Texas ran, like I've been just harping on, the no middle, but it was also under the Ross Hodge defense, who's now the North Texas coach when McCaslin left. And last year they ran more of a rim funnel defense where they really try to cut off the 3 line and force everything into Warren Washington. You also don't have that this year. You don't want to be forcing things into Federico because he's going to foul out in 9 total minutes of the game. So they could, if they go back to no middle and as a top 50 pick and roll team with top and small ball 5, and his swing skill for the NBA is outside shooting, like it's pretty, I'm with you. It's all the upside in the world. I don't have anything really more to add beyond that.
Yeah, the defense is kind of what held this team back last year. They were 65th nationally after being top 25 his last 2 seasons at North Texas. Ken Palm's got him 7th to start the year. That's probably aggressive, but man, if they have the 7th ranked defense, I think this is going to be a top 20 offense. And what they always say about national title contenders, usually you have to be top 20, top 25 in both of those. And I think Texas Tech has a real shot to do that. Let's keep it moving. We got a couple teams left. We got 3 teams left. We should be able to speed through these. Let's go to UCF here. 17 and 16 last year, 66 at Ken Palm, 7 and 11 in conference overall. They lose what I categorize as replaceable. All 5 replaceable pieces here. They bring in Key Hall from Mason. Benny Williams finds himself on yet another team. Jordan Ivy Curry. What are your thoughts on the roster turnover here at UCF?
Yeah, they tied for 2nd in the Big 12 with Cincinnati, who is everyone's touting as a sleeper team. It was a top 25 defense, which was also a calling card for Johnny Dawkins for his better, quote unquote, better UCF teams pre-COVID. If you think of like the Taco Fall teams, but you lose all your rim protection, right? Silla, Omar Payne, Diallo, CJ Walker, Marcellus Avery, all gone. Top 75 in near proximity defensive percentage. So they did protect the rim pretty well and also kept opponents away from it. So maybe the top 40 near prox defensive frequency alleviates some of that, but you return Darius Johnson, who, as I eloquently tweeted with not sort of stat bending numbers, but the only guy in the conference with 15, 3-3 with 2 steals in the game, 2 steals per game. So yeah, he's going to be a factor, especially if Jalen Sellers is going to miss a big role. It was like a really weird non-contact injury. I don't know if it was back. I don't know what it was, but just went down like going basically dribbling up from the free throw line extended to the top of the 3-point line. It just went down. So he could be out for a while, which would only increase Darius Johnson's role. You get Keyshawn Hall, 6'7", George Mason transfer. Like, this is his 3rd school in 3 years. He was a strong rebounder and a strong 3-point shooter. So at 6'7", I'll call it a good piece. You bring in Jordan Ivy Curry, volume scorer on his 4th stop, 3rd school. 3-point shooting came along, so maybe he's all right. And Debo Coleman, right? Just a Georgia Tech transfer bot. Mikey Williams, for all that he's faced, right? Former high pedigree recruit. He pleads 9 felonies down to 1, avoids prison, then eventually reduces that felony to a misdemeanor. So now has his 2nd lease on basketball life. Super athletic, above the rim scorer for his size, but also there's a lot of reports the game is a little bit more pizzazz than it is substance. So yeah, ultimately pretty safely back half the Big 12, especially if Sellers is out. This could be bottom 4th. Yeah, I thought last year they played a little bit over their skis, and to replicate it, I don't know if they got really the defense to do it like they have. That's driven them in years past.
Yeah, I missed that Sellers thing. Was that in a scrimmage?
Yeah, it was really weird. I don't even know if it's back. He's had back injuries in the past, which is why I would speculate it's that. But literally was just dribbling the ball up, a couple feet, and just went down on his, like, literally on his chest onto the ground and couldn't move. So he taken out on a stretcher. It was really weird.
Wow. All right. Well, that's probably going to force Jordan Ivy Curry into early minutes. The UTSA transfer shot nearly 40% from three. You said so they bring in Mikey Williams and Dior Johnson, the former Pitt guy who also.
I didn't even have Dior Johnson in my notes because I thought he was sitting in an orange jumpsuit right now. But I guess he's back in college basketball.
Dior Johnson and Mikey Williams.
Yeah, so they have an in-house law counsel for the UCF basketball team, clearly.
Right. Yeah, no, I think all of this is going to end up with another mega usage season for Darius Johnson. I know you called that last year. 15-3-3 with over 2 stocks last year. You have a note here that he was the only player in the Big 12 that did that. I really like the Keyshawn Hall pickup from Mason. Was their leading scorer and rebounder. I think he gives Gav just kind of like some certainty on a roster with not a lot of it, right? Like, what you're getting from Johnson and Sellers if he's there. But outside of that, like Benny Williams, Dior Johnson, Mikey Williams, the LaSalle transfer, I think those are all obvious wild cards. I think Hall gives them some stability outside of the guards.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, we didn't mention Benny Williams, right? Dismissed from Syracuse in Red Autry's first year, midway through. Another high pedigree guy. Yeah, wild card to describe those 3 guys is probably the understatement of the show, in all honesty. So
Benny Williams, Dior Johnson, and Mikey Williams. What is Johnny Dawkins doing?
Trying to save his job. That's what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
Like, he just says, "I'll take anybody." And yeah, so basically, I get okay. So like, I don't know. We don't need to spend a ton of time on UCF, but like theoretically, the ceiling comes through for Dior Johnson, Mikey Williams. They all play. They all avoid jail and court time. They don't have to be doing depositions, and they can actually practice the game of basketball. I don't know. It's definitely higher than kind of where they're currently slated at, either Ken Palm or Torvik wise, but which is 61st and 66th. But if that doesn't pan out, then yeah, this is probably a team outside the top 100, especially if we don't think the defense comes around without the rim protection.
Yeah, quick peek at their non-con before we move on. Only 3 games of note. They are going to be on our first slate of the season, Gab. They are home against A&M. I know I texted you about this one.
A team that loses all their rim protection against a team that assaults the rim at a ferocious rate. Okay.
I believe my first bet of the entire season will be Texas A&M next Monday. They play a neutral against Wisconsin, and they're at home against FAU. So outside of that, not much to look at in the non-con before they start conference play. We got 2 teams left. Gav, I think these 2 will be quick. Let's go to Utah, 22-15, 48th at Ken Palm. Like you said, this was Craig Smith's shot. This is Craig Smith's shot at it. They end 48th, but obvious losses here. Davon Smith, we talked about him last week. Brandon Carlson, the dynamic front court player, is also gone. Kibakita, who we talked about earlier. Raleigh Worcester, who we talked about last week as well, all gone. They bring in kind of a hodgepodge of transfers. I think the one with the most pedigree, Mira Little from Baylor, former 4-star guy. What are your thoughts about the losses here, and does Utah have any chance in this conference?
Well, I can easily answer the second question. The answer is no. But yeah, it's kind of like Colorado, just a team that doesn't retool. You lose Brandon Carlson, a once in a decade type player for Utah. You get bailed, maybe the team most bailed out by the waiver decision to let second-time transfers play because
Yeah.
it allowed Davon to play and sub in for the Raleigh Worcester injury. So, yeah, losing those guys plus kind of the upside swing in Kada, and you reload with Mongolian Mike from San Francisco, Ezra Alser from ECU, and Gabe Madsen's brother from BC, who's just a literal worse version of Gabe Madsen. So, yeah, I mean, Mira Little is the upside piece. Well, hold on, sorry. We should start with Lovering because he's at least the returner, right? He's got pretty incredible rates. He was the highest defensive BPR on Mia last year for Utah, like by margin. If you took his defensive BPR and compared it against everybody in the Big 12, it would have been the 6th highest in an elite defensive conference. So he is going to be a good rim protector with good rates that we're going to have to watch for DFS. Mira Little, yeah, like top 40-ish guy previously, a European kid. I think he's from Finland. Definitely has like catch and shoot 3 ability, which is basically all he did at Baylor. You know, it's like all his highlights, everything that you look at him at the college level, at least, is on that. But he's going to move onto the ball. He's a powerful guy that, you know, should be able to put pressure at the rim with some range, a little bit of playmaking. But, you know, yeah, he's probably the swing piece of whether this team finishes like top 80 or like outside the top 120. So that's basically what, you know, Utah's dealing with. Like Mongolian Mike comes in, switchability, 6'8", somewhat playmaking wing, like super underwhelming O ratings, kind of a guy that we thought would break out that never did. So yeah, you're just replacing like incredible players from that Utah doesn't come across all the time with a bunch of guys that just haven't proven it or didn't even do much at the mid-major level to make you think that they can do it at the Big 12.
Yeah, it's a bottom 3 team in the conference for sure. I think the one thing that they'll be able to do at least decently, is shoot it from range. Last year, everyone in their projected top 6 was at least 36% from 3. So maybe they get hot and take down a couple teams in conference. I think that's probably their only prayer.
Yeah, you're gonna have teams doing the back-to-back mountain trip for the first time ever. That, you know, the Pac-12 teams, you had to pay 3 to 4 points of line value in the betting markets, like, you know, recently. So that'll be new for them. Maybe they pick off someone at home shooting hot, but that is literally their only route, I think, to win games in the Big 12.
Yep, agreed. And Lovering, the center, 7'1", going to step in a much larger role. Nothing behind him. I think the backup big man, Gav, is Zach Keller from Wake Forest. So, you know, this is Lovering's time to shine. Like you said, the rates were good, and he finally, in his senior year, gets a chance to play some big minutes. So he will be a DFS asset for us. All right, let's close it out with West Virginia. God awful academic school, terrible basketball team. 9-23 last year, 144th at KenPom. They eject the coach. They bring in DeVries from Drake, who brings his kid. We don't even have to go through their losses because it's their entire roster. But Jesse Edwards, Ray Battle, Kirk Risa were their top guys last year on just an absolute dog shit team. Being this low in KenPom in a conference this good, Gav, is really, really tough to do.
Yeah, I mean, last year was a disaster, right? I mean, you don't just eject Eilert after this year. You eject Bob Huggins right before the season starts, and you leave him with the assistant coach, who Virginia's about to find out what that's like. But overall, I really like Darian DeVries. I think he's one of the better mid-major coaches in the country, now getting a shot at the Power Conference. He's made the tournament 3 of the last 4 years. He's basically finished 50th in KenPom last couple of years. And Josh Eilert, finished 150, God knows what. Darian DeVries, he lost to Evan Mobley, USC in the tournament. He lost to Miami 2 years ago when remember that game? They were leading by 8 with 4.5 minutes.
Yeah, and then Miami didn't miss a shot on the stretch.
And then last year they lose to Wazoo, leading by 8 with 6.5 minutes left in a game. They go 6 from 14 from the free throw line. I think this is easily a coach that they win any of those games, he might have even gets a step up to one of the Michigans that, were available, kind of some of the bigger jobs this offseason, something like that. But anyway, brings in his son, Tucker DeVries, who is just going to be one of the better players in the Big 12. There's really no ways about it. It's just a matchup nightmare. You know who you're going to see a lot of similarities to in DeVries is Illinois Damask. Now, Damask was not as good at the mid-major level that DeVries was prior to coming to the power conference level, but Damask also made a jump larger than what anybody thought kind of was possible. So it's basically DeVries and Javon Small, who had a really sneaky year for just an abysmal offensive team in Oklahoma State. So their 1-2 punch is going to be like really good. Definitely the best of any of the lower tier teams. The question is, what is around them? It's Joe Yesufu on his 15th school in 17 years off a multitude of injuries. It's Toby Okani from UIC, who had an 85.60 rating last year.
Hey, he's a defender.
Yeah, it was Jaden Stone who played the Antoine Davis role at Detroit Mercy, who we have questions about, efficiency wise, transferring up. The two swing pieces they do have are Monty Hansberry and Sincere Harris. Hansberry's a former top 60 guy, put up really good rates in limited minutes at Illinois, 122 rating. His defensive rebounding percentage at 22nd would have been just outside top 100 nationally. Long, strong power forward. I think it's really good, upside DFS wise early. He should be starting. This is the guy that DeVries just needs to roll out in his first year and hope that he pans out to have any sort of upside. And then Sincere Harris is going to be just the menace defender that he was. Sat out most of last year for Illinois with injury. Comes back, is going to be one of the best 90-foot guard defenders probably in the conference. So there's some pieces. This is a team for somehow I'm a little bit more bullish than 86th at KenPom at. I think this is a team that can really finish kind of more in the meat of the conference than the back end. This would be the projected 86th finish at KenPom would be DeVries' worst finish in the last 4 years. Now all we're at Drake in the Missouri Valley, but still analytically it all relatively pans out in the end, kind of numbers wise.
Yeah, I think I have them at the top of. So I'll put Arizona State, Colorado, Utah, West Virginia, Oklahoma State all in one tier. I think I've got this team up with Arizona State at the top of that tier with Utah, Colorado, and Oak State below them. There are actual players on this team, high major players, Javon Small, like you said, played 33 minutes a game at Oak State last year, was arguably their best player. DeVries from Drake is going to be the star, like you said. Drake's a mid-major, but they play high major teams in the non-con pretty regularly. And then, 2 Illinois transfers. So this team has high major talent on it, which is more than I can say about Colorado, Utah, teams like that. And like you said, with Harris as a really good defender, Okani was all defense guy in the MVC. I think they're actual pieces here. They're also super old outside of Harris, Gav. I think pretty much everyone is a fifth-year guy. So you've got experience. You have a good coach. You have a leading scorer. I do like this team more than consensus. Taking a quick peek at their non-con, they play at Pitt the second Friday of the season. Oof, they have to play Gonzaga on a neutral. I think they're in that Atlantis tournament, Gav. And then they're home against Georgetown. So we'll probably find out more about them that week at the Atlantis. Any last thoughts here on West Virginia?
Dude, put up Tucker DeVries and Javon Small against any of those other teams in the conference. They're a tier above for me. They might be at the back end of the tier above, but they're so clearly above the Utahs, the Colorados, the Arizona States for me personally. So maybe that puts them more in the 60 to 70 range, which I'm pretty good being high on them coming into the year. I think we're betting on this team early.
Yeah. The issue is the first chance we're going to have to bet them is going to be against Gonzaga.
I actually just choked saying that we're going to have to bet West Virginia early, which after last year, it is mind blowing, but here we are.
Yeah. All right. Let's wrap things up. Let's go to the accolades that we always talk about at the end. Gav, I'll let you talk about the All Big 10 or the All Big 12 team here.
Yeah, I think it's pretty safe to be 3 locks. With Dickinson, Lipsy, and Caleb Love. just with kind of the counting stats that they'll put up. And then I think there's basically a discussion of 4 other guys for the last 2 spots. And I'll be honest, I'm kind of moving more towards you than I was when I initially texted you, because initially I had Omir and Tucker DeVries. I think Tucker DeVries is going to be it's daddy ball. When you play for your dad, you shoot the damn basketball. That's how it all works, even at the college level. Fucking Patrick McCaffrey got to do it at Iowa. It's the same old. He's going to put up good volume with playmaking and rebounding. So I put him and think Omir goes for his usual double-double, and it's just hard to not put a guy on the first team when he goes for a double-double.
Yeah, I just think that Houston's going to have a guy on there because they're going to be the number 1 team in the country. And I think LJ Cryer is going to average like 18 a game and be like the quote-unquote like star player for a team that is usually more of a sum of its parts than like having a star. So I think my pick would be LJ Cryer. I did mention Coleman Hawkins. I think Hawkins has an outside shot, Gav. Like just going from the 3rd, 4th option to the number 1 option. I think that we just don't know what the ceiling is, right?
Edgecombe is in that same discussion.
Yep.
Toppin is in that same discussion. Like the upside for these guys is legit first team all conference, but that's just a lot more projection than kind of where I was ready to go.
Yeah. And then as far as the breakout players, as you guys probably know by now, we are, we go for the guys making the jump from playing, low teens minutes or even less than 10 minutes a game to having a real role. We're not going to be picking breakout players like I saw earlier today in Sports Illustrated, who had DeJuan Harris as a breakout player, a guy who's played.
Never heard of him. He's only been in college for 9 years.
He's won a national championship as the starting point guard for a team. So I think I really like our top 4 here. I think we can probably drop off the last 2 and just talk about the top 4 real quick. I think Krivas is the number 1 for me. Just put him in the Ballo role, right? You had talked about like not pushing 30 minutes. I don't think he has to push 30 minutes to have a huge breakout here. I mean, Ballo averaged 24 minutes a game last year and was an all-conference player. I think Krivas has that type of upside.
Yeah, I mean, how many times did you hear me pound the table for Krivas last year? Like, in these random night slates or whatever. The upside is definitely there. You also have there's lineups that Tommy Lloyd is going to try out, and if they work, he's going to use on a long-term basis where Awaka plays the small ball 5, Trey Townsend plays the small ball 5. You also have Visar coming back from injury. So that was the one that I wanted to, but I didn't quite get there just because I think there's a minutes cap on him. I think there's really 2 guys that stand out for me. I guess 3, but the third one is so disgusting. It's basically by default. One is the Ernest Uday role we talked about.
Yeah.
No top 150 guys literally behind them taller than like Traz White. And you're not going to run Traz White small ball 5 in the Big 12. That's not doable. The other is you had to pick between basically the KJ Lewis, Jalen Bradley role.
Mm-hmm.
And just with KJ Lewis, I really like Carter Bryant. Carter Bryant's going to have to be a factor for that team offensively. Anthony Del Arso is going to have to play for that team. So KJ Lewis is the one that I think cedes minutes to those other guys, where Jaden Bradley plays way more on the ball as the point of attack defender next to Caleb Love, where his role is safe for, I think, minimum like 20, 28 plus type minute role, which, would be, I think, another, 8, 9, 10 minutes up with mega usage upside. I think those are kind of the 2 guys that stand out. And then, oh God, it's disgusting. But Julian Hammond,
he's just going to have to play a shitload of minutes,
bro. He's going from the 6th man to the number 1 guy, and it's literally nothing more than that. That's about the definition of a breakout. I don't know how else to put it, and it's not going to be pretty, but you just have to hold the nose and press the button on that.
Yeah, I'm with you on Jaden Bradley. I would replace Jizzle James on this list with him if I could right now. I think that you convinced me that James is going to have a lesser minutes role this season just because of the makeup of their roster, right? It's just tough to play him and Day-Day at the same time too much. I think Lovering is in that exact same boat as Julian Hammond, probably with more DFS upside, just on a shit team. It's finally his chance.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, the more I think about it, Lovering is basically in the Uday spot. Like there's no depth behind him with good rates.
Just on a worse
do a
team.
full minute roll. So I think we probably need to include Lovering.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is the Big 12. We did it in under 2 hours here. Like I said at the start of the show, we've done the ACC. We did the Big East and the Big 10 already. They are live in the Run Pure Sports YouTube channel. They're also pinned on Twitter, Steve Boynton VT. It's my pinned tweet has got the links to all of the preview shows. We'll be back Halloween night. We'll be doing a late night show, wrapping up our conference previews. We're going to do the SEC, arguably the best conference in the country. Lots of money to spend in the portal for all those teams, Gav. So the SEC will be fun. I can't wait for that. We'll see you on Thursday. This was fun. We're getting into the truly elite teams in the country, and we're inside a week. So I can't wait. All right. We'll see you Thursday night. For Gav, for Steve, we're out of here.